Hi, how is everyone doing? I'm Michelle, and I've been reading from Jim Stevens' most incredible book. It's called 101 Proofs for God. And oftentimes I find myself saying 101 proofs for the absolute existence of God. So we have been reading them. They're just so incredible. And it took him 9 years to write these. I also believe that he received some help from above. So we are going to be reading proof number 95, or call it chapter 95, and it's called Archaea. Okay, let's get started. Probably most of you have never heard of Archaea. I had never heard of them either until just recently. In fact, the world had never heard of them until they were discovered in 1977. Wow, not long ago. Archaea constitute a domain or kingdom of single-celled microorganisms. These microbes are prokaryotes, meaning that they have no cell nucleus or any other membrane-bound organelles in their cells. Classification is difficult because the majority have not been studied in the laboratory and have only been detected by analysis of their nucleic acids in samples from their environment. Before 1977, they had always been considered a type of bacteria. But then microbiologist Carl Weiss was able to recognize that they were very different from bacteria. This is what he says, or this is what is read about him. He had stumbled on a brave new world of microbes that looked like bacteria to our eyes, but were in fact so uniquely biochemically and physically that they have ultimately proved to be more closely related to us than to them. He had stumbled on an entirely new form of life right here on Earth. 1977, not long ago. Being a believer in the theory of evolution, he concluded that back at the beginning of Darwin's Tree of Life, there must have been an early split. Bacteria went one way, and Archaea and all other life went the other way. Of course, Archaea was so primitive, it had to have branched off from the tree of life itself at the very beginning. It doesn't even have a cell nuclei. So we came up with an all new branch, and thus there are now three major branches off of Darwin's tree of life. Evolutionists don't really give an explanation for whatever it was that came before these three branches. To get a better idea of some of the differences between archaea and bacteria, one good website is called Wise Geek. Here is just one point of many. Archaea and bacteria are both single-celled microorganisms known as prokaryotes, but this is one of the few things they have in common. Even though they both look vaguely similar when viewed through a microscope, each represents a completely different group of creatures. In fact, archaea differ from bacteria as much as humans do in terms of their biochemistry and genetic structure. Archaea and bacteria have different cell membranes and cell structures, and archaea are found in extreme environments where most bacteria could not survive. It turns out that archaea are totally everywhere on the earth. In fact, they make up as much as 40% of the biomass in the open ocean and 20% of the biomass of all living things on the earth, even though they are microscopic in size. Archaea are particularly numerous in the oceans, and the archaea in plankton may be one of the most abundant groups of organisms on the planet. Wow. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some are totally different from each other and do the exact opposite thing biochemically. Here is an example. Archaea carry out many steps in the nitrogen cycle. This includes both reactions that remove nitrogen from ecosystems, such as nitrate-based respiration and denitrification, as well as processes that introduce nitrogen, such as nitrate assimilation and nitrogen fixation. Jim says here, see my chapter 48 called Nitrogen Cycle for more information on this. To our surprise, we have found supersized filamentous archaea almost big enough to see with the naked eye, living on mangrove roots. We have found methonogic archaea that interact with protozoa in the guts of cows and termites to help these organisms break cellulose down for energy. We've even found an archaean that lives symbiotically with, of all things, a sponge. Archaea play an extremely important role in maintaining all life on Earth. Some scientists have found archaea are involved in ammonia oxidation reactions, which are very important in the oceans and in soil. Archaea produce nitrate, which other microbes then oxidize to nitrate, which is a nutritional requirement of plants and other organisms. Archaea are required in the carbon cycle also. They play a role in the decay of organic matter for the functioning of ecosystems in sediments, marshes, and sewage treatment plants. Different archaea are active in the sulfur cycle. They help release sulfur from rocks so it can be used by other organisms. Some researchers believe that we would never have been able to come to exist on the earth without archaea. Millions of years ago, the earth was covered with methane gas. They think it was the type of archaea that digests methane that ate it all up, or we could never have come along. Wow. Even today, some scientists estimate that archaea convert 300 million tons of methane per year into more life-friendly chemicals. Scientists have discovered a methane metabolizing archaea in the extreme pressures of deep sea sediments. It is estimated that these bacteria-like organisms consume 300 million tons of methane each year, which prevent the Earth from turning into a furnace. According to Kaiwei Hinrichs, a biogeochemist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts. Excuse me, my pronunciation at times. And he is one of the authors of the study. If they hadn't been established at some point in Earth's history, we probably wouldn't be here, he says. A tremendous amount is not known about Archaea. Nobody knows how many species of Archaea there are. Estimates say there are 18 to 23 phyla, but only 8 have been even studied a little. Consequently, our understanding of the role of Archaea in ocean ecology is rudimentary. So their full influence on global biogeochemical cycles remains largely unexplored. But scientists have been able to learn some things about their internal makeup, their replication, and the biochemical processes they exhibit. Let's note here that they do not reproduce sexually. There are no male and female, so it is hard to apply the theory of evolution. They do not have parents to give them 2 different sets of DNA. So let's look at some of the questions that evolutionists are not going to be able to answer. If you have read any of my previous chapters, Jim says, like Proof for God, number 40, Surality, and Proof for God, number 21, called DNA, and Proof for the Existence of God, number 27, called The Truth About Mutation, and number 35, called Natural Selection, then you are probably already asking yourself some good questions. In the very beginning for evolutionists, somehow DNA came to exist. In the opinion of many scientists, it would be impossible to come into existence without superintelligence involved because there is so much order, information, and design to DNA. But let's skip over that discussion for this proof. Evolutionists were forced to put Archaea and bacteria at the very bottom of the tree of life because they're so primitive. But they are so different, it is impossible to explain that one was the ancestor of the other. So they don't. They make separate branches of the tree and leave the beginning a mystery. This is one of many incredible diagrams. It's not very clear. Yeah. As an example of their differences, bacteria and Archaea use amino acids with the opposite handedness, chirality. These are the very building blocks of their existence. Archaea are more like humans than bacteria. Wow. To mutate from bacteria to Archaea or any other living thing is impossible to conceive of based on the different handedness of their enzymes. Remember, DNA is a long, long chain of millions, if not billions, of individual amino acids. Evolutionists have to believe that enzymes of both left-handedness and right-handedness somehow developed once to produce Archaea and the plant-animal branch, and another time to produce bacteria. The odds are astronomical against an enzyme coming to exist by evolution even one time. But two independent times is not conceivable. And then another miracle has to happen to produce the third branch of the tree of life, plants and animals. We could stop there, but let's keep going. Once one archaea somehow exists as a fully functioning cell, it has to already contain all the necessary DNA to be able to replicate itself. And Jim says, please read chapter 41, called The First Living Cell, to learn how difficult it is for that to happen. Here's something else. Archaea hold all the records for being able to survive in the most extreme environments, like hot and cold and acidic or salty. If there was one very first archaea, how do you explain such an extreme diversity of archaea living in every environment on the earth? They are single-celled organisms, so when they multiply, they do not have two parents from which to inherit different DNA. Their DNA somehow makes a copy of itself, and then the cell splits into two daughter cells having exactly the same DNA. They just make a copy of themselves according to their existing DNA. I will concede that there might be some mutations during copying, but this is not a process that leads anywhere toward species development. See my chapter number 90, called Copying Degradation. Yeah, that was a great one. And my chapter 27, called The Truth About Mutation. Mutation is very rarely beneficial. It usually leads to death. There's no hope there for growth and development of many different phyla of Archaea. Archaea live in many such extreme environments that they could not have evolved there. There are archaea that are living at 130 degrees on the ocean floor, centigrade, on the ocean floor next to an active volcano. Water boils at 100 degrees centigrade, remember. Wow. There is no oxygen there, and the heat destroys all other living things. So, how did they get there in the first place and not get destroyed along the way? How could they adapt to the heat in that environment without being killed first? Excuse me. If the heat didn't kill them, how did they get oxygen and energy? They would have had to evolve the ability to convert compounds in the environment into oxygen and energy after they arrived there. Excuse me. I'm just sort of at the end of a cold. It's pretty clear that they had to be able to survive in that environment before they ever got there, not after they arrived. Survival of the fittest is totally out of the realm of possibility here. How about the type of archaea that can thrive in a totally acidic environment of pH 0, comparable to sulfuric acid? Wow, all plants and animals die in acid. Since evolutionists put Archaea on the tree of life, how do they explain that some type adapted into being able to do this? They could not have adapted once they were in the strong acid environment. No survival of the fittest, because there are no survivors. Even bacteria, which evolutionists say came earlier on the tree of life, are killed by acid. Different types of archaea also live in extremely alkaline environments. Some can live in extremely cold environments. Others live in the soil, the ocean, marshlands, even sewage. There are even archaea that live in our stomachs that help us digest certain types of molecules. We are really lucky that they are there, or we might not survive. That's a very acidic environment, which dissolves almost everything that comes into it. But not your very own archaea. Methogens such as M. smithii, the most abundant methonogic archaean in the human gut, is an important player in the digestion of polysaccharides, which are complex sugars. Methanogic archaea help to remove excess hydrogen. Here's a neat little sentence with gigantic implications. Like bacteria, archaea cell membranes are usually bounded by a cell wall, and they swim using one or more flagella. So, how can evolutionists explain one or more working flagellum on an archaea? That means they have a working tail that motors them around. A tail takes a lot of engineering. A half-evolved tail does not work. Evolution cannot explain in slow, gradual steps how you get a flagellum. Archaea are so tiny that we can't see them, and yet there are so many that they make up 20% of living things on the planet. There are so many different kinds of them, and they all seem to provide extremely essential chemical processes for our survival. We die without them. There's still a lot more to be learned about them, but just knowing what we know already makes it impossible to believe that they occurred by random chance or natural selection. No evolutionary explanation suffices. So there must be God, Jim says. Yes. Okay. So we really have to say thank you to Jim for this. Quite incredible. Thank you so much. I hope you guys get the book soon, because the diagrams and the pictures inside are really incredible. Okay, take care. Bye.